So I had this paper sent to me about 100 times, and it's interesting. This was published in ASJ, and it's just a horrifically bad paper. But let's talk about a few points the paper makes. And I think it's a great example of how you really have to understand a subject matter to understand research. So this is a meta-analysis where they looked at all the available literature in an area, and they ended up looking at 33 papers. And only 7 of those papers were prospective. So this is not great quality evidence at a baseline. And they make some funny assertions in it that aren't supported at all by the evidence, and I find it shocking that this got through peer review. So the first assertion they make is that biofilm is a causative agent for BII. They also say that there's an autoimmune reaction to implants that causes BII. Neither one of those things have evidence for it, and I'll explain to you why. So they say in here that biofilm is a causative agent because 39% of women with BII have a biofilm, but they don't tell you that women without BII have biofilms at the same rate. So there's no evidence it's a causative agent. And I'll try to explain this simply, but basically if you remove your implants, you get better at the same rates, whether or not you had biofilm or not. And this has been repeated. So we don't believe, and there's no evidence that biofilm is a causative agent for breast implant illness. As for autoimmune, there's a few things. So they cite that ANA was elevated in BII patients. It's about the same rate as it's elevated with people in the normal population too. So I don't know how they could come to that conclusion. They also cite one of the ASERV trials where several of the interleukins were elevated in the BII cohort, but they didn't mention that they also had a lot of confounders in that group which could elevate those things. So they made a very strong stance with little evidence. They also in the study mentioned synovial metaplasia, that's a marker of inflammation, and that is associated with breast implant illness. But what they don't mention is that in the ASERV trial, synovial metaplasia was more common in the non-BII patients with implants. They also make some weird assertions about silicone implants or silicone being the cause, and again, there's no evidence for that. They mention that 70% of the patients in the studies have silicone implants, but they don't mention that worldwide, that's the most common implant that's implanted. Here in the United States, in the ASERV trials, there was, I think, more saline implants actually in the BII cohort. So there's no evidence of that. And they've also had studies that have shown that in saline implants, there's no silicone in the capsules, where it's present with silicone implants. So if silicone was truly the cause and silicone in the capsules was the problem, you wouldn't see it in saline implants, BII that is, and you do. And this is just a great example of, number one, a poorly done study. So there's a lot of problems with it. You would not be able to identify these problems unless you had the subject matter under your belt. So someone like me who reads about this stuff all the time, even I read it and was confused and spoke to some of my friends like Pat McGuire, who was one of the authors on the ASERV trials, about what I saw and what I thought was wrong with it. And she had a lot of really good points. This is just a bad paper. And the fact that it's being used to convince patients of things that aren't true and aren't supported by evidence is upsetting. And of course, one of the videos that was sent to me was from an explant expert talking about this paper, not mentioning any of the things that I just did, saying how it was published in a high quality top journal and we should listen to it, yet he's still recommending en-bloc capsulectomy when capsulectomy was shown in another paper published in this journal several years ago to not be needed for these patients. So this is why you can't do your own research, and this is why you have to be extremely careful in who you trust when it comes to getting health information, because even within the plastics community, we have people that are not practicing evidence-based medicine. They are not doing right by their patients. They are fear-mongering and profiting off of that fear-mongering, and it's disgusting. So this is just a bad paper. There's nothing new in it. This is a meta-analysis. They come to conclusions that are not supported by the studies that they looked at, and people are using this to profit off of women again, and it's upsetting.